Hey, this is Christy Lammers with Lammers Ag. I have the pleasure of having Paul Parcher here today with us, who is our channel agronomist. So I'm gonna let Paul introduce himself, how long he's been with channel, and then we'll get started on a few questions for things to think about this spring with planting.
Hi, everyone. I'm Paul Parcher, and I'm the Channel Technical Agronomist for North Central Iowa. And I've been with Channel now coming up on 17 years. So I've got quite a history. Been working with Christy now for several years as well.
So, Paul, when we top of mind for some farmers, obviously, as we're March 6th today, we're going into the fields and guys are starting to get thinking about and have been thinking about a lot of different things. But when we think about what the weather outlook is for the planting season and the growing season, specifically for the planting season, what are your top of mind thoughts on that for farmers to consider?
As an agronomist, I spend quite a bit of time watching the weather, and I like to look at trends and the patterns and everything. And I've been tracking it for over 30 years. And so one of the things I like to do every year is to take a look at what our growing season weather is going to look like. And I go to the National Weather Service and take a look at what they say, and they give us little monthly looks at it. And with their predictions of what's going to happen there, and you try to maybe guesstimate and try to use that information to help you make some decisions.
Right.
And so as I take a look at this upcoming growing season here for spring planting right now, things look like they might be trending towards normal for temperatures, and I'm going to say normal to maybe leaning towards wet for spring. When I say normal for temperatures, what's important about that is when I take a look at the 30-year trends with that, for April, we've actually been trending cooler for temperatures over the last 30 years. So when we say normal, we're probably talking a little bit cooler for springtime temperatures. And when I take a look at the information there, I'd say with where we're at, we're kind of on that line between normal and leaning wetter. So we don't quite know what that's going to bring to us, but so we're going to have to be prepared for maybe both sides of the conditions.
Okay. Kind of along with that, Paul, another question that I think is in the guys' minds, field preparation for the spring. What are a couple things that, they need to consider and think about as, again, we start getting them planters going in the fields?
So one of the things I take a look at, especially when we take a look at and it's actually been the last several years, we've been trending dry, and we've been dry for a long time. We got dry soil conditions right now. So one of the things that stays in the back of my mind is, what can we do to preserve soil moisture? And something to consider, and it's something that easy to forget, and that is that every tillage pass that you make in the spring can cost you some moisture. Now, of course, it depends on your soil and how deep you go, and residue and how much water you have there to begin with. A variety of things can impact that. But anyway, every tillage pass you take can cost a little bit of moisture. So I would encourage you to think that do you need to take a second tillage pass? If you really need it to improve the seed bed, then I'd say absolutely you probably want to do that. But if it's maybe more recreational, maybe think about skipping that pass. Another thing that I also consider is just the equipment that's being used. And I'm going to make this specific to vertical tillage equipment, because I think vertical tillage equipment is great for fall use. It's great at sizing residue. It's great for shallow incorporating residue. But in the spring, it can make a fantastic seed bed to plant in. But the other thing it does is it tends to pulverize the soil. And when the soil gets pulverized and we get rain, or the soil might be a little bit on the wet side when you're planting, it can lead to some additional crusting risk with it. So as a producer that might be considering using a vertical tillage tool in the spring, you're going to have to weigh that risk between a nice seed bed versus maybe increased risk for crusting.
Okay, that's good to know. The other thing, I guess, that has always been on top of mind here in the last 2-3 years for sure is corn rootworm. We talked about this before, but with the cold weather that we've had this winter, what are your thoughts on the population and, might we not see as much or hopefully not, right? I mean, but just on corn rootworm in general, I mean, that's obviously been in our area and more impactful here in this last, 3 to 5 years. We've seen it grow.
Yeah. So with corn rootworm, so part of my educational background is I have a degree in entomology, and so I always have had a passion for insects. So with the corn rootworms, I like to track them. Their uh, I track them all year long throughout their life cycle. And so right now over winter, uh, we're taking a look at the egg portion of the life cycle, and every year we go through winter time and we have some cold temperatures. And the first thing that gets commented to me is like, wow, this has been cold enough there. We really should have had a big impact on the corn rootworm egg population. The cold weather should have killed a bunch of them off. But the thing is that oftentimes we've got some nice snow cover that provides a really good insulating blanket, and it protects those eggs from really getting that cold. And for Western corn rootworms, I guess one of the things I take a look at is that soil temperature. And I guess I have access anyway to 4-inch deep soil temperature through the mesonet from Iowa State. And when I take a look at that, I'm looking specifically for about 18 degrees Fahrenheit and for temperatures getting down to that. And just the research has shown that when we get temperatures that cold, that's when we start to have an impact on that corn rootworm egg population. Now, of course, the longer the duration that we have, the more impact that there is. So just getting down there probably isn't enough to have much of an impact on the eggs. But if we start having several days and weeks like that that are cold like that, we can start having an impact on that population. And so the thing that was unique about this year, which I've been doing this for, I think I'm coming up on my 34th crop year, and I cannot ever remember having a winter where we were actually open with no snow cover, where we got as cold as what we got this year. And so we actually had temperatures that actually got down even below that, or soil temperatures that got down below that 18 degrees Fahrenheit. And so normally when people ask me if I think there's been an impact to the eggs, I'd say, no, I don't think so. But this year, I'm thinking, we might have had a little bit of an impact. Now, what does that mean, as a producer? It doesn't mean a lot, because I'm going to tell you that, number one, we didn't kill off everything. So you really can't make any changes in your plans. You still need to manage for corn rootworms. I guess the thing that I'm looking at is it's a numbers game here, and that if we can trim back those numbers a little bit, it's less pressure on the corn. We still need to have the protection out there, but just as we move into the next year and the next year, if we can keep that population from really exploding on us, and Mother Nature really helps us keep that population under control, that's where I think the importance of it is. So by no means don't cancel your corn rootworm management plan, or your traits, or your insecticide, or whatever you're doing to manage your corn rootworms. I need you to stay with it.
Okay, that's great. We haven't really talked a lot about soybeans, and I know, is there anything to think about, or as we go into spring for as far as soybeans go? We talked a little bit. I know you're in the office last week about, is planting rate a thing? Is there anything that guys should consider, this spring with beans? I know, there's we have both, options as far as enlist or our flex beans as well. But I mean, just as far as beans in general, any disease issues that we maybe should be looking for? Last year we found charcoal rot. That was one thing that we saw towards the end of the season. And, I think those kinds of things are, interesting for guys, even as we go into this year and maybe looking at different management.
Well, a lot of times the year is going to dictate what we might see for diseases. So for instance, our soils, a lot of our soils have got white mold sclerotia in them already. They've got the SDS, or sudden death syndrome inoculum, in them already. And really, whether disease shows up or not is dependent on the tolerance of the variety that you have out there, but also very dependent on the environmental conditions that we have for infection to occur. So if we don't have the right conditions occur, then we don't see very much infection take place here. So it's hard to say what we might see for disease, but I can pretty well rest assured that we're going to see something. I just don't know what the level is going to be. As we get into springtime, one of the things I consider is we've seen a push in recent years, and I really like this, of planting soybeans early. I think there's some nice advantages to that there. We kind of extended out the growing season. We had the opportunity to maybe get another note or two on the plants. So I think we have a good chance there. Sometimes in a sense there, the conditions are maybe a little bit better to plant soybeans than it is to plant corn. So I would advise farmers to just keep that in the back of their mind anyway, that maybe if corn might not go, maybe take a look at doing planted soybeans.
Okay, so along with that, I'm gonna ask the next question. What's, quote unquote, the ideal soil temp or conditions to put those beans in if you're looking at the two? So corn, beans, I mean, I know everybody knows this, but I always like to just kind of remind, and hopefully I know we get going on things and sometimes we can't help it, but ideally we don't like to have the seed in the ground more than 17 days, I think max. We talked about this last week, I know, again at the office, but just a little bit of, if we had the perfect scenario to plant.
So, of course, perfect scenario there is having nice warm soils, decent moisture and everything like that. Oftentimes, we don't really get that at planting time. So, what we like to see is warming soils. I know you go back years ago and there was kind of a line drawn there for, you wanted 60-degree temperatures for soybeans, for soil temperatures for soybeans. You want 50-degree temperatures for corn, and of course, warming on both areas. Anymore, as I take a look at where we're at today, maybe the focus is maybe a little bit more on 50-degree soil temperatures and warming at that point. I guess when I take a look at the planting there, I know one thing we had to consider with soybeans is I like to take a look at the extended forecast, because we can actually get the soybeans up. If we get them in the ground early and the soybeans actually get up and out of the ground and they're growing there, we're still at risk of frost there. And corn itself can recover pretty good from a frost, but an early, or call it maybe a late season frost. But soybeans, their growing point is above the ground and they can just be killed off right away by a frost. So that's something to keep in the back of your mind. But when I'm also considering early planting, I'm taking a look at also the amount of moisture that the seeds got to imbibe, and really the imbibitional period that the seed goes through. And corn has a longer period than soybeans, and so we want to really pay attention to that with cooling temperatures and things like that. And so with soybeans, that window's a little bit less.
Okay.
So it doesn't take as long for it to imbibe the water. And so if we end up getting cold after that, we tend to see less issues with soybeans, and they tend to tolerate that better than what corn might.
Okay. Yep, that's great. So is there anything else that you would say to guys as we're going in? I know obviously I just did a call with a guy for planter, looking at your planter and all the checks and check boxes on that. I know, for me, I always try to make sure that we're placing the right hybrids in the right soil as much as we can, and talking with our growers about that. Emergence, obviously, with all the different impacts that we've seen, and you've seen even more than me over the years, a lot of things can affect emergence. But for the most part, I think those are probably the main issues that everybody's thinking top of mind. So yeah.
I would say one thing that I would add, just when you're out planting, one thing I run into, and it's every year, it's not all over, but it seems like I have at least one instance a year where this happens, is when guys don't get out and actually check their seeding depth. And It's funny that there will be one row that is being planted shallow or being planted deep, and you'll see that pattern show up in the field there. And it's something that I couldn't tell you how much yield that might cost, or I would say it's costing some, but I couldn't tell you how much. But it's one of those, it does look a little strange there early on there to have that row behind.
Right.
So it's worthwhile to get out and take a look and just make sure that your depth is pretty consistent, and that of course the seed's dropping.
Right. Yep, exactly. And that call that I just did this morning with one of the guys that does precision planning and works on planters was saying exactly that, and that, you know, getting out that first day and just really taking your time to make sure, and even like going a 40-foot, you know, pat, like 40-foot length, and then being able to look at the depth and just taking the time before you really get going. So that video will be really good, everyone. When that comes out, we're going to talk about planter checks and just top of mind things that you can think about, even in a season where dollars are tight. We don't necessarily have to have all new equipment, but just making sure that things are accurate. So we've seen a lot of things. I know, Paul, just even in the past, I know a couple years ago, we were out on a field where we kind of had a lot of things going on, and then it ended up a grower called back and said that on both sides of his planter, one box, one row, like you said, he saw it in other fields. And you know, that costs some dollars when you talk about as far as that row goes, and if it's multiple fields, as far as an impact on ROI. So those are good points. So I guess that's it for now, you guys. So glad always to have Paul here. Paul will be in a lot of different videos this summer with us doing checks, you know, Haley doing checks. Well, you know, we're always out there, but we always appreciate all the support that he gives us here at Lammers Ag, and look forward to a great 2025 with channel and all of you out there. So thank you and have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.